Here is the engine combination. What you see is a World Merlin 4 block. It's a fantastic block that's there. It's bored to 4500. There's a SCAT 4340 forged crankshaft, 4250 stroke. SCAT 6.385 H-beam rods with AR 2000 cap screws. A Molly piston that's got a dome on it. Now, the dome has been milled down, and also we had to clear to get extra piston to valve clearance. But the whole thing yields about 12.3 compression ratio from the best math that we can do. It ran on 110 octane race gas. It has a solid roller comp cam in it, and this one is their low shock lobes. It's got 820 lift on intake, 808 on exhaust, 275 degrees of duration at 50 thousandths on intake, 288 on exhaust, 112 lobe separation. The intake manifold combination changed a bunch, and that's going to be a different video. But I could tell you we ran the Brodix BM 2000. That's a 4150 style manifold. We also ran it with a Dominator. We also ran a Brodix 2002 and HVH 2002. That one has a turtle that's in it, and that's what a lot of the oil tests that you're going to see today are used with that manifold. And also we used what you see in the picture here, the Edelbrock 2896 that's completely stock. The Dominator carb that was used was an Edelbrock 1050 Dominator. It's their Sportsman Series one. It's not definitely not their most expensive one or best one. And let's see. I think that, as far as valve train goes, these are stud mount rockers. These are comp cams, the XD Magnums or Ultra Magnums, steel ones that they have, and it does have a stud girdle. Now, these are Promax 317 heads. These heads are almost stock. I don't want to claim that they are because these heads have been milled down from 119cc chamber down to 110cc chamber, and that got us to 12.3 compression ratio. They do have 2.300 intake valve with a 50-degree seat, and the exhaust is still a 188 with a 45-degree seat. There's no port work done. Only the valve job got changed in milling because these are the heads that were used on the 496. So that's the combination in general. We did run a crank trigger just to keep the timing the same so it's easy when we change manifolds. If you have other questions about the combination, put them in the comments. Hey guys, this is Eric Weingarten with Weingarten Racing. Today's video really is about oil level and how it affects horsepower. Now, I know other people have done several tests on this. Trust me, I hear you. I did not plan to do that type of oil test at all. I plan to do a bunch of intake manifold tests. It just happens to be that we end up testing a lot on the oil levels because, well, the power sucked, let's be honest with it. So what you see here on the dyno sheet, this is the Dunsworth Machine Shop in Enid, Oklahoma, built this 540 for me. I clearly don't have time anymore to build engines, but he had built this and he made 2 dyno runs, and I saw this, and you're looking at it too, and you're like, 780 horsepower from this 540. It seems like I've created a turd. So when I got there, I was like, well, we at least have a baseline, so I know hopefully we can only go up from here. But that wasn't the case. So this is 781 horsepower. This is like this is only the second pull, but the oil level ends up making the largest difference in horsepower I've ever seen, more than even a set of cylinder heads. And trust me, this happens strictly by accident. A couple things before I begin. I'm under the weather, so my voice sounds different. That's the reason for it. Second thing is, I'm about to show you a bunch of dyno graphs, oil pressure graphs, and whatnot. If you're having a hard time seeing it on the phone, you can actually purchase these. So if you go to my website, wengines.com, and on the home page, there's a link to my online store, and you can go there and you could purchase all these dyno sheets, and actually more than just the ones I'm showing you in this video. You can purchase all the dyno stuff, all the graphs, videos, or graphs, not necessarily videos, but all the graphs and everything from the last dyno session that has this 540 in it. So you don't have to wait till next week to see what the intake manifolds did. You can have all the information anyway. It costs 20 bucks. And it gets text to you, so you get a bunch of pictures texted to you for that. So that's 20 bucks. There's also books on the online store of old dyno sessions, like when the 496 had these same set of cylinder heads that we're using on the 540 are there too. So you can get those as well. But anyway, I wanted to point that out because I know sometimes it's really hard to see on the phone, especially since some of you are probably watching it on your phone, but you're not wanting to sit through a commercial, so you're watching a third of your screen on your iPhone, so it's really tough to see. So, but anyway, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to talk about is the pan. Now, this is a hamburger pan, and this is very similar to the one that was ran on the dyno. So the one that was ran on the dyno was a hamburger pan, but it was for a big block. This is a small block Chevy one, but the design is essentially the same. There are some differences because last week I had mentioned that I had used, last week's video was the 540 Engine Master engine, and I told you I had used a hamburger oil pan like this, but I had modified it to use the Titan oil pump. Well, the 540 doesn't use a Titan oil pump. It used a Moroso high volume welded pickup tube on it oil pump. It's a spur gear. It's not a gear rotor gear like the Titan. So the pan really looks a lot like this, and I'll tell you what stuff got modified from this. So the pan itself that was used in the video you've watched, the 540, it had its windage tray like you see here, and it also had a crank scraper that goes all the way down. Now what was different was this. You see these are trap doors that you have, so the oil can obviously go back whenever you're accelerating, and it closes when you're braking. You also have these steps here, and also you have the cuts here. This stuff, that here, this here, these ledges here all got cut out because the Titan oil pump's a big old square deal. It's about this big, and it sits right down in here. So the pan itself had this whole part got cut out to make the Titan oil pump fit. Now, on the Dyno Mule, I did not use the Titan oil pump. I used the Moroso high volume welded pickup tube. But I'm telling you this because the pan was modified for the Titan pump that it was originally on that. That's why this part's different. This, exactly the same. So it still had a crank scraper and it still had a windage tray, which in my mind, and I know a lot of minds of many of you, well, that's very good. It's got, you got crank scraper, because the idea for it is there's a whole lot of oil whipping around. The crank scraper will grab some of that off, and same with the oil. It will get pushed through here. It's unidirectional, and it can't splash back through here. That was a thought. So I thought, shoot, oil things under control. No problem. This is better. Because matter of fact, the small block Chevy Dyno Mule that I'm doing, it has none of this. It doesn't even have a crank scraper. Doesn't have a windage tray. It's simply a flat bottom. I don't think it even has trap doors. It has nothing there. So anyway, that's essentially what the pan looks like. The part number for the pan, in case you want to know what the actual one was, it's 1488. It's a hamburger Econo drag oil pan. And it looks just similar to this. You got your square in the front, and you got a sump in the back. Now, this one's made for the S10 for a small block, but essentially it's the same thing. I mean, just a little bit bigger, but you get the idea. You can purchase it, it's 1488, all right? So that's the pan. I thought oil pressure, oil pump, no big deal. So when I saw that the first dyno pulls that he had showed, Gary showed 781, he said, how much oil does the pan hold? Well, if you look on if you go to Summit or you can go to Jegs, no matter, 1488, and you look at the pan, it says it holds 8 quarts. Now, obviously one holds in the filter, but it's supposed to hold 8 quarts. So he had put 8 quarts in. He's like, I don't think that's enough. This pan's really kind of big. It's doing weird stuff on the top end. I think it's sucking the pan dry. Because what you were seeing was stuff like this. These are oil pressures, by the way, and we'll talk about where these are from in a second, but I didn't have the first one that he had. But you could see as the pull would go through, and these are RPMs, which I'm kind of leaving that one out for a second. But the oil pressure as the RPM, you can picture RPMs through the bottom here, it would drop. So it would be climb, 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 and drop hard. And we're talking like it went from, say, 86 down to 70. So it's 16 pounds of drop. So his thought was, hey, we're sucking the oil pan dry. There's not enough oil in here, even though it says it's hold 8. It's sucking the pan dry, so we're not getting as much on it. So before we can even test manifolds or anything like that, we weren't even trying. We're just trying to get the oil pressure kind of steady. So what he did is he added like another half quart of oil, and it did this. This is the oil pressure that it did next. So before, if you look, we start our pull, we're like at 80, and we're at 75. Adding 1 quart, we start now at 65, and we end at 60. So yeah, there's a 5 pressure drop, but the pressure itself is lower. So yeah, we only lost 5 pounds of pressure from beginning to end of the pool, but the pressure to the whole thing is lower. But that's not even the other part of it. Okay, that's the wrong page. There we go. It's got no power. So I got a little ahead of myself there. It has no power. So when he added the half quart, I showed you the 781. The very pull after he puts the half quart in, we're looking at oil pressure, and I just kind of showed you, is 65, goes down to 60. The horsepower went from 781 to 750. Excuse me. That's a 30 horsepower loss from almost a quart of oil. I think he added only a half. So half a quart of oil, 30 horsepower loss. So they were like, well, the oil isn't warm, because this is a huge deal. Very huge deal. If your oil is not the same temperature, it's really hard to do comparisons on manifolds. So whenever you see us doing comparisons like on manifolds and such, we're actually got an oil, we're measuring the oil temperature and water temperature. Those got to be about the same points or could affect things. So the oil was actually pretty cold, like 111 degrees. So once we got it up to about 160, we made another pull, 730. Lost 20 horsepower in one pull. Now, for those who have never been on a dyno, let me go ahead and tell you this. Whenever you're on a dyno and you start dropping horsepower, usually it means the engine's decided it wants to eat itself alive. So especially if you lost 20 horsepower in a pool and all you've done is change nothing, because that's all we've done. The oil just got warmer. So if you lose 20, it was like, oh my God. So first thing he does, he goes and pulls out the filter. He puts a little screen on top of the filter, see if there's any metal that will get captured in this filter, or this little screen above the filter. Nothing. I'm like, I think it's got too much oil. I told him, I said, I think we just have way too much oil in there. I think that's hurting it, and that's what's causing this. So he's like, well, let's check some other things. So I'm pulling spark plugs, looking at maybe the piston hit the spark plug or something like that. He's checking rockers. Rockers are all fine. So I said, you know what? Why don't we do this? Just to be safe, let's go ahead and drain the oil out of it. And we'll just put 6 quarts in it. In case you're wondering, by the way, what was your weight of oil? 1550. And you might say, why did you use 1550? Because the oil pressure was low. It was only 60 pounds. So it was like, you know, get the oil pressure up. So he's like, all right, that's fine. So we drain the oil, pull out the filter, put a new filter on. We add 6 quarts this time. So it had about 8.5 before. We put 6 in it with the filter. The pressure goes from this to this. So this is 8.5 quarts. So it's 70, drops to about 60 or well, 62. Look at here. This was 6 quarts of oil. Starts at 83 and ends at 98. So, and if you notice too, the oil pressure is climbing the whole way. Not this drop thing. Now remember, we're only going to 6,500 at this point. There's some other things that we end up seeing later. That's huge. We're like, oh, it's hard to believe that taking out 2.5 quarts of oil would cause your oil pressure to go from this to this. Because yes, I know Engine Masters has done it, but sometimes it's hard to believe it's that much. But that wasn't even the big takeaway. You're like, yeah, that's the oil pressure. This was the power. What you see in black line, this is with 8.5 quarts, 730, right? That's what we had, 730 horsepower. When we put 6 quarts in, look at it, 805. Look at this. If I could pour this on the cylinder heads and it gains that much, I am like, wow, I have done great. That was just oil. And matter of fact, you saved some money. So going from 6 quarts to 8.5. And remember, the pan itself's rated for 8 quarts. Huge difference. Huge difference. And I know you're thinking, well, that's just an A/B test, right? Well, we had kept 6 quarts in it through the whole time. So we ended up changing. We did 3 different manifolds, and we had kept 6 quarts in it the whole time. When we're at our last pull, because we tried doing other intake manifolds, they wouldn't fit. So we had extra time. So here's what we did. Because this is just A/B. This is 8.5 versus 6 quarts. Let's do something else. We did this. This time at the very end, just at the very end, we did this. We had 6 quarts in it. And this is, and by the way, the last time we had made some pulls, we went to 7,200 RPM. So at 6 quarts of oil, yeah, up to about 6,800, it's holding steady. So this is 6 quarts, the blue line up here at the top. And these are pressures. If you look, yeah, it's holding nice and steady to about 68, and then it's nosediving, right? And I say that, but it went from 80 to 88, or sorry, 88 to 80. So only lost 8. So what we did is we added 1 quart of oil. So now it has 7 quarts in it. And it caused, just to confirm that what we done earlier even did anything, right? We just want to confirm. This is what it did with 7 quarts. This was 6, that was 7. So this was a reaffirming what we had happen earlier. Yep, the oil pressure did that weird thing again. So then we're like, okay, remember that, now we've done ABA, but let's go back and let's try again. We drain out the oil. So we drain out approximately, didn't measure exactly, we drain out about a quart out, and then it does that line. So I think we actually probably didn't drain enough out to get the full quart because it still was dropping pretty good here. But look, it was way better by draining out. But check this out. 7 quarts versus 6 quarts again as far as your pressure, but got other stuff here. Just turn the page. There we go. This was 6 quarts versus 7 quarts, again with power. So in the black line here, this is 6 quarts. This purple one is 7 quarts. So when we added the 1 quart of oil, that's an 841. This is an 813. That's almost a 30 horsepower loss from 1 quart of oil. Crazy, right? Now, we drain out that quart of oil, or about to it. Look at this. So this black line, 7 quarts. The top line right here is exactly 6 quarts. This other one's draining out about that 6 quarts. Look, it matches. So this is A, B, A, B. We went back and forth several times. It's confirmed. Shocking. Shocking. Just so you see as far as the actual raw power numbers on this. Here we have 843. This, by the way, what intake is this one being tested with? This is the one with the turtle in it. And this is with the Dominator. By the way, the engine itself made 875, but that's a later video, but it wasn't with this intake. So this is, let's see, this is with 6 quarts, 843. And this is when we drain it back out, and we're almost the same at 842, within 1. And what you saw from this graph. So does oil make an absolute difference in power? Absolutely it does. It sure does. Now here's the catch. We're on a dyno. And the thing is, the dyno actually makes it sit, the whole engine sits level. So if you have oil that's here, it's not going to drain back. So in a car, we have some tilt to the engine, so it slides some of the oil back. That doesn't happen on a dyno. The other thing, and I can't express this enough, dyno is not necessarily the car, and I'll give you a prime example. So in my Camaro, which runs 536s in the 8th, like 131 in, and this is NA, it's got the Titan oil pump on it. It's got the Moroso nice pan, which I'm going to probably test later. But that pan's only rated for 6 quarts. I cannot run 6 quarts in the race car. And it's not because of acceleration, it's deceleration. So if I have a data logger so I can record all this stuff. But in the car, I'll maintain 60, 65 pounds of pressure. The second I let off with 6 quarts of oil, even though, and that one's got it's got baffles to keep the oil from sliding all the way forward, and it's got a trap door and all the nice stuff, right? As soon as I let off, and I'm easing off, because if you chop it, I think it's even worse. I'll go from 65 pounds of oil pressure, it will drop down to like 12 on the decel, 12. And so what I've been doing is I've added an extra quart of oil, so I'm at 7, even though it's supposed to be at 6. So when I decel, it will hold about 25. Now, the pressure seems about the same during a run. The point I'm trying to make of it is oil level on a dyno is not oil level in a car, because a dyno does not have to decelerate. However, filling your oil pan up too much is a definite power loss. You might say, well, this is fantastic, but it doesn't seem like I can use this because I can't use it in a car, because like you said, you got to have a certain amount of oil. You can, as long as you could figure that out, that balance between the decel and acceleration. Run as least as you can that you need. Now, here's future testing. So as you guys know, I dyno test a ton of manifolds. The next time that the big block goes on the dyno, here's what's going to get tested. I'm going to pull off that Moroso high volume spur gear pump. I'm putting on a Titan. I'm going to put on a Titan gear rotor. It's a different design. So we're going to have a spur gear versus a gear rotor gear dyno. And I'm going to use the same hamburger oil pan, pop it back on. I'm going to make some pulls. And then I'm going to pull off the pan and put on a very nice Moroso kickouts on each side, baffles. It's a really nice pan, and we're going to dyno with that. So pump versus pump, pan versus pan, and then I'm also, if the E85 carburetor shows up, I'm going to test how it does on E85. Guys, remember, I am no Superman. I do not port cast iron heads. Thanks for watching. You guys take care.